A lot of the conversation in the cryptocurrency space focuses on the front end pieces of the crypto experience, namely price and sometimes things like transaction speed, but often only if something is out of the ordinary. However, it can be argued that the crypto world should be spending more of its time and energy examining what's happening in the back end of the space. Recently, finance magnate spoke to Joe Lallouz, co-founder and chief executive of blockchain infrastructure company Bison co-founder and chief executive of blockchain infrastructure firm Bison Trails, about the dichotomy between the front and back ends of the crypto industry and the impact of price movements and the growth of the DeFi space. I'm Rachel McIntosh. Okay. Joe is also the founder and CEO of Ambush Labs and a part. Joe is also the founder and CEO of Ambush Labs and a partner. Joe is also the founder and CEO of Ambush Labs and a partner at Ambush Capital, and previously served as a senior director on the leadership team at Etsy, where he was the business head for Etsy's innovation group. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is the Finance Magnates Blockchain Podcast. So first of all, Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It's great to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me, and likewise, it's good to see you again, even in the crazy times that we're all living in right now in the world. It's great to see you even over a Zoom call.
Yeah, exactly. It's strange for me to live in Finland. I kind of feel like on the outside there's all these nice and happy, smiling Finnish people, and on the inside the world is on fire a little bit.
Yeah, but it must be nice in Scandinavia, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a different world. Can you tell somebody who might not know, who's watching or listening to this, a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Absolutely, and super happy to share more about me and kind of my background and what I've been up to, and then obviously the company I've been working on and the projects that I've been working on in the last little while.
Definitely.
But yeah, so my name's Joe Lallouz. I'm a serial entrepreneur and startup founder. Over the course of my career, which is, I don't want to date myself, but it's been a little while now. I've built a number of venture-backed software startups, mostly focused in the sort of software space. Yeah, have been spending a lot of time as a founder, building companies, building teams, and trying to build technology products that help break down barriers and democratize access to sort of different markets and different spaces. Mm-hmm. I'm an engineer by background. So my co-founder and we've been working together for close to 20 years now, which is crazy. Yeah. We're both technical, and we've spent a lot of time building technology and building sort of very deep technical projects and focusing on companies that solve very deep technical problems. Mm-hmm. Most recently, I should say not most recently, but the sort of company before the current company I'm working on was a company called Grand Street. It was an online marketplace for new technology devices, and we were building APIs for manufacturing, so helping new entrepreneurs that wanted to build new consumer devices, new products, get those products sort of manufactured and shipped and built and shipped, which is not a easy thing to get done. In 2014, we sold the company to Etsy, where I joined the leadership team, and I was there for a few years, working on new businesses. So I was running this group called the Maker Innovation Group, which eventually morphed into the Seller Services Group. And so we were building a lot of services for Etsy sellers for the 3 years I was there.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's a little bit about my background. I'm kind of a big nerd. Really love tech projects. Really love solving very hard technical problems and building businesses around solving those technical problems.
So how does Bison Trails sort of fit into that mode of being?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I should say towards the end of my tenure at Etsy, and my tenure at Etsy was just over 3 years. So I was there for a little over 3 years, and decided towards the end of those 3 years, in the last few months, that kind of wanted to move on and wanted to work on being a founder again, and founding a new company. There's this sort of almost addiction to starting startups, and being a founder, and it's a very difficult, very demanding job, but is really hard to get away from kind of once
It
you've
was
done it.
high adrenaline kind of a thing, maybe.
Yeah, totally, very high adrenaline. And so Etsy was a great place to work. I loved working there. Incredible people, incredible leadership team. I was a huge fan of the company, but really decided that it was time to move on. And I kind of mentioned to you before, I've always been a pretty big nerd, and have been just generally interested in the blockchain and crypto space for quite some time, for quite some years. Even while we were building the last company, was pretty interested in what was going on in blockchains, what was going on in crypto. To be entirely honest, most of it was Bitcoin related. It was, this was 2012-ish, ballpark 2012,
Okay, so way
2013.
back in the day.
Yeah. Had some exposure through through other technical friends to Bitcoin in general. I don't like to say like I was very early in Bitcoin, because honestly, I wasn't. I was paying attention to what was going on, and sort of saw the space sort of coming together, but didn't really understand exactly the potential impact that Bitcoin and blockchains could have on the technology space in general. But nevertheless, spent a lot of time following it, sort of paying attention to the people that were building products and services and projects in the space. And Grand Street, which had this marketplace element to it, was actually one of the first commerce sites to integrate Bitcoin payments using a third-party provider. We were pretty early in that, and that didn't work out perfectly well, so we ended up like unintegrating it. But it was kind of like early part of our thinking processes was this idea of programmable money and transfer of value networks and store of value networks was super interesting to me. After I was working at Etsy, was starting to explore doing more angel investing and investing in new founders that were building new companies, and found myself meeting a lot of folks that were building new products and services and working on new blockchain protocols or new crypto projects in the blockchain and crypto space. To me, I found this absolutely fascinating, that over the course of just a few years, some of the smartest and most interesting people that I had ever met or would be meeting were building new companies or new open source projects or new protocols in the blockchain space. So started looking and spending a lot more time in blockchain, generally speaking. So when it came time to actually leave Etsy, I left, and Aaron, my co-founder, and I took a year off. Okay. And in that year, we spent that year really exploring, acknowledging that we were very fortunate to be able to take that time off and sort of take a step back and really decide, like, what did we want to spend the next 10, 15 years on? What did we really care about? And we could not get away from this idea that blockchains and blockchain technology and crypto networks and transfer of value networks were the future. It was the future of technology, future of finance, and really future of most software systems were going to be built on top of these decentralized networks that powered a lot of this store and transfer of value. Right. And it could be because I'm very nerdy. It could be because I'm a bit of a futurist. But this idea that large scale computer systems could essentially exist on their own and transfer value on their own, not just data on their own, but make decisions and then transfer value on their own, just makes a ton of sense to me. It seems so obvious. And so we started exploring the blockchain space, and sort of push come to shove, we started working on a few different projects, and realized that in the blockchain and crypto space, there was incredible people building different pieces of the technology stack, but no one was really focused on the sort of I don't know how to like really describe this other than it's kind of a unsexy piece of the technology stack is this infrastructure piece. It's not
Right.
like, it's not very glamorous. It's
Mhm.
not very, there's not a lot of glory in solving infrastructure problems in blockchains. And so there wasn't a ton of people working on it, but it's a huge problem in the space, is like really building out mature infrastructure layers for the space in general. And so we said to ourselves, someone is going to build this company, and we've already built a few different pieces of it. As we're exploring the space, we should focus on solving these problems. And that's kind of how we ended up building Bison Trails. And so Bison Trails is an infrastructure as a service company. So we build infrastructure components for blockchain protocols.
Mhm.
Anyone who wants to build a new service, launch a exchange, custodian, they want to build any kind of data product, they have to interact with blockchains. And we have an infrastructure platform that makes it really simple for those companies to do that.
Right. So just to be clear, there are no tokens, like you can't, buy like a Bison Trails token or anything
No,
like that. Yeah.
no, there's so we aren't at least not currently, at least as of not as of August 2020, there is no Bison Trails token. Um, we we exist in service of blockchain protocols. So blockchain protocols in general issue tokens either as part of utility or work token to interact with that network itself. Um, and so we support participation in these different in these different protocols. So we don't actually have a token ourselves. We enable folks to participate in blockchains like Cosmos and Tezos and Algorand and Ethereum and Bitcoin and Celo and sort of all these different ones, and have made some waves over the last few years in helping a lot of these protocols go from sort of early testing phases all the way through their mainnet launches, which is a pretty significant feat for a lot of these different protocols, and then even some of the sort of more mainstream, larger scale protocols like Facebook's Libra project, sort of brought us into the mix in terms of like helping that protocol get built.
Okay. Okay. So I know that Bison Trails is a member of the Libra Association, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you
Mm-hmm.
also helped with some of the infrastructure of that project.
Yeah, so we, I can't believe it's actually been a couple of years now, but a couple of years ago, we were approached by the team, the team that was formerly at Facebook, now is part of the Libra Association.
Mhm.
But at the time they were part of Facebook. We were approached by the Facebook team to ask if we would be interested in joining the Libra Association, because we had over a short period of time built up a very strong reputation as being the best technology provider in the space to help build out the infrastructure. And they were looking for partners to join this association alongside them, and Uber and Lyft and Spotify and Shopify and all these massive companies
Mhm.
to help build this blockchain and this crypto network, and approached us and asked if we would help them build it out. So we've been pretty involved on the technology side. I'm personally also on the technical steering committee, which is the steering committee that helps govern and push forward the open source roadmap. And then as well, we're association members, so we help govern the project and govern the association.
That's pretty sweet, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been definitely fun. It's been super fun, and in reality, we actually work with a lot of these different protocols. So each of the different blockchains, especially newer, what are often referred to as second generation or third generation blockchains, Solana and Cosmos and Tezos and Near and we're and Live here. We're pretty involved in the communities themselves and pretty involved in the governance of these different protocols. We're a technology platform, so we stay as a company, we stay sort of agnostic in terms of what happens on the protocols themselves, but we often will help protocol teams understand their users, understand folks that want to build in the space, and really help drive towards like product market fit in general.
Okay, right, I see. So, and one more question that I have, about you guys is I've always been so curious about the name of the company because it's so sort of unusual.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I love that you bring up the name. It is unusual.
Hmm.
It's not what you would think of when you think of a blockchain company.
Yeah.
Um, and in a lot of ways, that's actually deliberate and by design.
Yeah.
When when we were working on this company, so one of the sort of untold stories about Bison Trails is before we started building specifically this infrastructure software company,
Mhm.
Aaron and I actually spent some time building out a proof of work mine. So if you know a little bit about the blockchain space, there's some, I was going to call them legacy systems, but that's not fair either because they're pretty active today. But basically, the way that infrastructure for the Bitcoin network is set up is there are these concept of miners, and what miners do is they run specialized computers on the Bitcoin network to help secure the network. Without getting into like the nitty gritty details of how that works, it's a sort of process that folks can do to participate in these different networks. And while Aaron and I were spending time sort of exploring the blockchain space and infrastructure in the space, we like to do the sort of thing that founders do best, which is really like dive headfirst into solving problems. You know, you sort of get to the edge of the cliff and you're like, what's happening? And then, you know, you don't really think about it. You just sort of like dive and figure out the rest on the way. And one of the things we did when we started looking at blockchain infrastructure was actually we built out from the ground up a proof of work mine. And the thing about proof of work mining is that there's a couple of restrictions around how you do it to do it really well.
Mhm.
You need a pretty, you know, cool or temperate environment. You need to be a pretty remote location, and you need to have access to pretty inexpensive power. And we're based in the United States, and the majority of those three things tend to happen in areas that are, you know, sort of remote and mountainous, where there's like lakes and rivers and a lot of outdoorsiness. And so for a few months, we actually spent a ton of time in the middle of the United States in sort of states like Wyoming and Utah,
Oh my God.
and then in the Pacific Northwest in like Washington State and Oregon State. And so we were actually found ourselves like in the middle of a lot of these small towns that were like, you know, speckled between, you know, federal or national parks and, and a lot of wildlife around us. And in a lot of ways, you know, we're sort of like, this is really interesting. And there's a lot of parallels between what we're doing today and building, pioneering this new infrastructure and pioneering this new technology. And a lot of the pioneers in the early days of the United States that were moving from the East Coast over towards the West Coast as they were moving, you know, in the gold rush. And one of the animals that sort of is pretty prevalent in those areas are the bison. And bison are notoriously untamable. They're a wild animal, and they also create these trails, these paths that early pioneers would follow across the country.
Really? I
Um,
never knew that.
yeah, yeah. And so when we were naming the company, we, you know, we sort of were faced with, you know, naming a company, first of all, is incredibly hard. Having done it a few times now, it's a thing that I dread. It's never fun because you're stuck with it forever.
Yeah.
And sort of we were sort of faced with this idea of like, what should we call the company? We can lean into this idea that it's like, you know, an infrastructure company, a technology company. But we wanted to name it something. There's two things. We wanted to name it something that was a little more fitting with our personalities. So something a little bit more playful, a little bit more, I don't know, like a little more bubbly than you know, strictly an infrastructure
Yeah.
company, because that's sort of our
Right.
personalities.
Blockchainica. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, we didn't want to name it like, you know, Cipher, yada yada,
Yeah.
or like, you know,
Yeah.
block four. You know, it just didn't feel like us really.
Yeah.
And then you know, the other piece was we wanted to kind of give a hat tip to some of the early work that we had done in the space. We were sort of like, this is really interesting. You know, we're building this company that's kind of paving the path forward for this technology. We should name it after you know, this idea, these you know, the bison, and this idea of like bison paving these paths for the pioneers. And so that's where the name came from. It's,
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
yeah, so we decided to go with it, and I can't remember who came, if whether it was myself or it was Aaron that came up with it first, but I just remember we were kind of sitting in the kitchen in my apartment and we were spitballing and sort of shooting names back and forth, like, what about this? What about that? And one of us said, like, what about Bison Trails? And we are like, that's actually super cool, fits really well, and like has a lot to do with kind of like the roots of the company, and also like, you know, has an eerie, like a large amount to do with kind of what we're doing. It's like these bison were paving these paths forward for pioneers in a lot of ways. Like Bison Trails, the infrastructure company, is paving the path for entrepreneurs and pioneers in the technology space that want to leap and take the step forward towards the future of tech and software.
Yeah, definitely. No, I have to say I had all kinds of like, and as someone who's just seen the name and seen you guys operating in space, I had all these guesses about why the company was named Bison Trails. And I was thinking it maybe it was
What was one of the best ones?
yeah. I think probably the one that I settled on was that it probably had something to do with the game Oregon Trail, if you remember.
Yeah, not. I mean, I guess like in a lot of ways it kind of does, right? Because the Oregon Trail game had to do with like pioneers moving across the country, and so there's sort of a lot of parallels there. But yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that was an early computer game. Okay, anyway, but anyways,
yeah.
I want to ask you, sort of from your perspective as somebody who's working on these infrastructural things in the cryptocurrency space, you really have sort of a unique view into the back end of the cryptocurrency world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I want to know, what are you most excited about at the moment? Right now, we've got, the price of Bitcoin is going, towards 12,000. All these altcoins are springing up and just bursting through the ceiling. So there's a lot of talk about that. Do you find that exciting, or are there other things that your attention is sort of focused on right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. The price of Bitcoin and the price of altcoins and sort of the price of the prices in general in crypto are something that I definitely don't. I think that I pay attention to, but on a very rare basis. So it's not something I'm paying attention to daily. It's not something I'm paying attention to weekly.
Mm-hmm.
As both and as an individual and as an angel investor, I've always been pretty exposed, generally speaking, to the crypto space. So, I've made plenty of angel investments in crypto companies and new projects and protocols. But I've always taken what I would consider a very long-term approach to those investments. So, as opposed to folks that are doing things like trading or building up hedge positions or sort of actively participating in the trading and swapping of cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking at it as a lot of the technology that's being built is still nascent and in its infancy, and the prices are kind of a distraction. The day-to-day price swings are sort of a distraction. There's also a tremendous amount of volatility in crypto. So if you work in the crypto space in general and you're paying attention to price every day, you're going to go crazy. It's like, to see something go from, up 20% to down 20% from a day-to-day basis is pretty insane. It makes you, after spending a few years in crypto, you look at like, the regular equities markets or something, and you're like, wow, everything moves so slowly. But actually that's normal. Like, that is how things are supposed to move when they're mature, and there's sort of, a little bit more maturity behind the space.
Mm-hmm.
So not really paying a ton of attention to the markets themselves. I think, there's a lot of talk of the B word. We're like in a bull run right now, and it's a bull market, and that's great. I hope there's a bull market. I hope that the prices keep going up. What I found is that that kind of activity creates more general exposure to the space, and it introduces more newer and more people to the space as a whole. So you have new company builders, new entrepreneurs, new founders, their interest is piqued by the excitement and the sometimes that excitement turns to hysteria, and that can be dangerous, but that happens a lot, and it brings a lot of new people into the fold, and that is fantastic for crypto and blockchains, and that's really exciting to me. So the prices I don't really care about. The sort of knock-on effect of these price swings I think are really interesting, in that it piques people's interest. what is exciting me, and this
Yeah.
is, sort of not so much that the price, not it's actually not price related at all,
Mhm.
is that we are currently in a high innovation, high growth phase of the crypto market. So in 2017, 2016, 2017, kind of early 2018, there was lots of entrepreneurs, projects, and founders that were building new blockchain protocols, and they went through this sort of funding, financing cycle where they would raise a bunch of capital, and you know, there was this sort of ICO boom where folks were ICOing these new protocols, which was a great, it was a really interesting way to bring funding and financing to a new space that
Mhm.
didn't really have it before. But we're now kind of 2.5 years later ish, and a lot of these projects and protocols are launching, and
Mhm.
so we're moving from this sort of like quiet build phase, which is great for infrastructure companies and for new protocols like us. So Bison Trails was founded kind of in the earlier days of that as well.
Mhm.
And we're starting to see them all launch, and that's really exciting because we're getting this new generation and this new wave of blockchains that are coming out that have really specific utility or really specific design implementations, that are meant to compete with the more generalist chains like Ethereum, for instance,
Mhm.
on very, very specific verticals. So you can have like a protocol like Solana, for instance, that is focused on like high transaction volume, high transaction speed. Um, you know, the founders wanted to solve specifically that problem because they were
Mhm.
seeing that the existing blockchains weren't solving that problem really well, and that was proving bad for some types of applications.
Mhm.
You also have like other protocols that are kind of competing on things like scalability and decentralization and things, employing technologies like sharding technologies to make it so that these blockchains are more scalable or less expensive at scale. And so what's really exciting to me, in summary, is that this technology is booming right now. That there's like
Yeah.
a huge amount of new technology pieces that are sort of coming to market, and that's started happening about a month ago, and will continue to happen probably for the next few months.
It is super exciting, yeah, and you're totally right. I love that observation that there was this long, quiet build phase, and that this is the moment when all these projects are sort of coming to a peak, or at least
Yeah,
launching publicly. Yeah.
yeah.
So I wonder sort of what you think a little bit more specifically about the DeFi space and the technology
Mm-hmm.
that's involved there. There's been a lot of talk about DeFi over the last several
Yeah.
months. And also so far this year there have been a couple of kind of accidents, shall we say, that have to do
Yep.
with infrastructure. So what are your thoughts on that space at the moment?
I mean, so similar to the sort of boom, the technology boom on the base layer protocols, these new blockchains that are launching. We're seeing a similar boom in the DeFi space.
Yeah.
So DeFi in general, to me, is fascinating. 2 years ago, DeFi didn't exist. For all intents and purposes, DeFi was not a thing 2 years ago.
Right.
It was just a few folks at a meetup that were talking about this idea that we could have finance that was built using these smart contracting platforms and systems.
Mhm.
The pace of innovation in the DeFi space has been astonishing.
Yeah.
So new protocols, new pieces of technology that sort of fit into the different protocols, everything from liquidity pools to automated market making to lending to insurance, like literally everything
Yeah.
across the board is sort of being built in the decentralized finance space. So what I think about it in general is it's astonishing how the breakneck pace at which it's innovating, and that's incredible. It's super, super cool. The other thing is that it's still a baby. It's like DeFi in general is a little baby. It's only a couple of years old. There's been plenty of mishaps or mistakes or accidents or missteps, so to speak. Whoops, we didn't realize that would happen, or wow, this happens at scale, and that is completely normal. And I think like a lot of the participants that are involved, whether they're investors or builders or token holders or even just folks that are trying out lending or trying out these new crypto assets that are designed to interact with the DeFi space in general, they're all sort of accepting of that. It's like everyone is kind of involved, like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, let me try understanding what it means to take out a loan in crypto and let
Yeah.
me, leverage these assets and maybe I can do something interesting with them. And so it's a really, really interesting, nascent, nuanced sort of ecosystem.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing that's crazy and that's cool about it is that it's basically been the number one use case for Ethereum for
Yeah.
the last little bit, which is great. It means like Ethereum has actually found product market fit in one vertical. That's awesome. Like that's amazing for the blockchain and crypto space. It's like um, if Bitcoin really nailed store of value and is sort of been viewed by the ecosystem as like the place to store value, Ethereum has really nailed this single vertical of the Ethereum ecosystem, I should say, has nailed this single vertical of like decentralized finance for right now. So it's cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. But I'm curious about your thoughts. Maybe if you have not necessarily a timeline in mind, but like maybe you can share your thoughts on what you think needs to happen in order for this to be, move from being this really cool nascent ecosystem that
Mm-hmm.
is, kind of filled with people who are mostly just kind of interested in the technology,
Mm-hmm.
and what would need to happen in order for this to become sort of a usable thing, for people who
Yeah,
aren't super nerdy like us.
yeah. So the you said something really interesting, which was that there's been a couple mishaps or missteps in the last few months, even in the last 6 months in the space, and I'm sort of acknowledging like, yeah, that's true,
Yeah.
and that's a great thing because the sooner and
Mhm.
faster these things happen, the sooner these kinks can be ironed out, and the sooner that we can move and transition these services and products to be a little bit more mainstream ready.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say, the pace of innovation isn't fascinating. Is the pace of innovation in DeFi is fascinating,
Yeah.
and the pace at which it's being battle tested is also fascinating. So it's not just that there's like technology that's being built, and it's cool that technology is being built. It's like actually there's 3, 4, 5 billion dollars that's locked up in DeFi, which is not an insignificant amount,
Mhm.
and we're starting to see these systems scale. So for a system like DeFi to be able to be mainstream for anyone who doesn't really use crypto to be able to take out a loan, for instance, and die. There's a few things that need to be in place. One is that like the infrastructure that supports that needs to be battle tested. So we need to know that this can scale to hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars for without failing for people to trust the system. And two, you need to have like really great interfaces and experiences where people don't even know that they're using decentralized finance. And I think that the first piece needs to happen first. So we're not quite there yet. I think we're getting there, and we're building a lot of the intricate layers. So if you look at like the current centralized finance world, there's even within that world, there's a ton of abstraction layers on top of it, and we're starting to build some of those in DeFi. And then from there, you start to build some of the products and services like you know what is the DeFi equivalent of a retail bank? Like what is it, an app on your phone? Is it, I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe is there a branch somewhere? I don't know.
Can you
Is there not? Is it a virtual branch? Like who do you talk to if you don't want to understand more, if you don't understand it? Like, maybe you read a blog post, maybe you join a Discord group. Um, I think we're going to see some of those systems, the UX. And when I say UX, I don't literally mean like the app interface. I mean like the entire experience as a consumer being built, designed, and making it easier for people to engage. And right now, it's just no one's really focused on it because you don't want to build like an incredible UX on top of beta software, so to speak. And I think like we're
Right.
still kind of in the beta software world.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, Joe, I want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so nice to talk to you, and so interesting to hear your point of view. Before we go, do you have any
yeah,
announcements, or can you tell also our listeners where they can find more about you guys?
absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at Bison Trails, or on the web at bisontrails.co. you can shoot us an email, hi@bisontrails.co. We love to hear from folks. If you're building in the space, if you're a custodian, an exchange, an asset manager, a holder, a fund, we work with all types of folks to help them participate in blockchain networks. So, definitely reach out. As far as things we're working on, we're obviously, like I mentioned, I'm really excited about the new blockchains that are launching, currently launching over the next couple of months. In particular, we're helping support the transition for Ethereum from Ethereum 1 to ETH2, which is a move towards proof of stake. And we're really excited about that. It's really big for the ecosystem. As we mentioned, DeFi is huge on Ethereum. Ethereum is making big changes to make it more scalable. And Bison Trails has been doing a lot of work to help support that. So you can come see on our website. We've written a whole bunch of blog posts, and we have a bunch of content that's specifically focused around ETH2. So if you want to participate in ETH2, you should come see us.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, that's super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely.